James had always been a man of substantial size, towering over his peers with a weight that tipped the scales at 325 pounds. His wife, Emily, petite and health-conscious, had recently watched several friends succumb to heart-related ailments. These losses echoed in her mind, amplifying her worries about James's health. It was a cool evening in February when Emily brought up the topic that had been weighing on her heart. They sat in their cozy living room, the flicker of the fireplace casting a warm glow over their faces. "James," she began, her voice laced with concern, "I've been thinking a lot about your health. I know it's a sensitive subject, but I can't bear the thought of losing you too early." James shifted uncomfortably in his chair, knowing this conversation was inevitable yet dreading it all the same. "I know, Em. I know I need to do something about my weight. It's just hard, you know?" Understanding yet resolute, Emily reached for his hand. "What if we made it a bit of a challenge? Something to motivate us both?" She paused, gauging his reaction before continuing. "What if our intimate moments were tied to your weight loss goals? Say, we could make those special times contingent on you hitting certain milestones." They discussed it at length, setting specific targets. Valentine's Day, their wedding anniversary, and both of their birthdays would be the milestones. Each of these days would not only celebrate their love, but also James's commitment to his health, provided he met his weight loss targets. Over the next 2 years, the plan seemed to work. James, fueled by his desire not only to improve his health, but also to reconnect with Emily in those cherished moments, lost a remarkable 118 pounds. He felt better physically, but emotionally and mentally, the journey was taxing. Each pound lost was a battle against his cravings and his comfort with his old lifestyle. The joy of each milestone was tinged with the strain of constant vigilance over his diet and exercise routine. As he approached the 2-year mark, sitting at 207 pounds, the initial motivation began to wane. The thought of continuing this regimented life started to lose its appeal. "I'm thinking of stopping, Em," James confessed one evening, after a particularly grueling session at the gym. "I've lost a lot, and I feel good, but it's taking a toll on me. I miss enjoying life, enjoying food, and, well, enjoying our time together without these conditions." Emily's face fell at his words, her mind racing with fear and frustration. "But you can't stop now, James. You've come so far, and it's not just about us, it's about you. Your health," she argued, her voice rising slightly in desperation. In that moment, driven by her fear of losing him and perhaps, unadmittedly, her need for their conditioned intimacy, Emily made a threat that would shake the foundation of their marriage. "If you stop now, then those special times, they'll only be 4 times a year. Unless," she paused, her throat tight, "unless I look for that closeness elsewhere." The statement hung heavy in the air. James looked at her, shock registering on his face, quickly followed by hurt and then a simmering anger. Emily immediately regretted her words, but the damage was done. The foundation of their marriage, once solid in mutual support and understanding, now showed the first signs of a deep and threatening crack. The morning after Emily's harsh ultimatum, the atmosphere in their home was thick with unspoken words and stifled emotions. James had spent a restless night in the spare bedroom, turning over Emily's words in his mind. The threat of her seeking intimacy elsewhere if he did not continue his weight loss journey gnawed at him, seeding a bitter chill in his heart. At breakfast, Emily tried to broach the subject, her voice hesitant. "James, about last night, James cut her off, his voice low and controlled. "I heard you loud and clear, Emily. There's no need to go over it again." The hurt was evident in his eyes, a stark contrast to the usual warmth they held. Emily winced at his tone but pressed on, needing to make amends. "I was out of line, and I'm sorry. It was wrong of me to say what I did. It's just that I'm scared, James. I'm scared of losing you." James sighed, his anger subsiding slightly in the face of her genuine distress. "I know you're scared. I am too. But threatening our marriage isn't the way to motivate me, or to keep us together." The conversation stumbled forward, a clumsy dance around their wounded feelings and the elephant in the room. Their now conditional intimacy and Emily's impulsive threat. Over the following weeks, the strain grew. Emily noticed a shift in James's demeanor. He was distant, his usual jovial banter replaced by silence or short, non-committal answers. He continued to lose weight, but the joy in his achievements was overshadowed by the tension between them. Meanwhile, Emily wrestled with guilt and fear. She regretted her words deeply, recognizing too late that her attempt to motivate James had backfired, threatening the very foundation of their relationship. She tried several times to make things right, to express her regret and reassure him of her love, but the damage was not easily undone. James, for his part, felt a growing resentment. He had embarked on this health journey partly for himself, but largely for Emily, to ease her worries and secure their future together. Now, the journey felt tainted, his efforts marred by the threat hanging over them. The more he lost weight, the more he felt like he was losing himself to a bargain he hadn't truly agreed to. As Valentine's Day approached, a day that was supposed to celebrate their love and another milestone in his weight loss journey, James felt a mixture of dread and defiance. He had reached the next weight goal, but the looming reward felt hollow. He knew Emily planned a special evening, likely hoping to mend their fractures, but he felt an inner turmoil that clouded any excitement. The evening came, and Emily tried her best to set a romantic mood. She cooked his favorite low-calorie meal, dressed in the gown he loved, and filled their dining room with candles. However, the effort felt like a bandage over a deep wound. During dinner, they managed polite conversation, but the intimacy that followed was mechanical, a stark departure from their usual passionate connection. Lying in bed afterwards, Emily turned to face James, her voice barely above a whisper.
"I'm sorry, James."
"I miss us." James turned to look at her, his expression a mix of sadness and affection. "I miss us too, Em, but I don't know how to get back there. Not when every touch feels like a transaction." The statement hung between them, a sobering truth that neither could deny. They fell asleep in each other's arms, not out of desire, but out of a desperate need for comfort in the uncertain storm of their relationship. In the weeks that followed, the pattern continued. James met his weight goals, but each milestone felt less like a victory and more like a step towards an inevitable conclusion. Emily watched him drift further away, her heart aching with the realization that her attempt to hold on to him might have pushed him away forever. As spring turned into summer, the air in James and Emily's home grew colder, despite the warmth outside. The cycle of weight loss and strained intimacy continued. Each milestone passed with diminishing joy and increasing resentment. James had transformed physically, now weighing just over 200 pounds, but emotionally, he felt drained and disconnected from the woman he had once shared everything with. One Saturday morning, after another silent breakfast, James decided it was time for a change. He had been pondering his options for weeks, wrestling with the dilemma of his health versus the health of their marriage. The scales, it seemed, had finally tipped. "I think we need to talk," James said as he watched Emily tidying up the kitchen, avoiding his gaze. Emily paused, her back still turned to him, then slowly turned around, a sense of dread settling over her. "What is it, James?" "I've been thinking a lot about us, about me, and this whole situation. I've lost nearly 125 pounds now, and I know that was supposed to make everything better, but it hasn't." "Not really," James admitted, his voice heavy with a mix of frustration and sadness. Emily moved closer, her expression one of concern mixed with hope. "But you're healthier now. Isn't that worth something?" "It is. It definitely is. But at what cost, Em? Our relationship has never been more fragile. And I can't shake the feeling that I'm being coerced into continuing, not out of love or even self-care, but out of fear. Fear of losing you, fear of not meeting these arbitrary goals we set." Emily's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. "I never wanted you to feel that way. I thought I was helping, but I can see now how it came across." "I'm so sorry, James." James sighed, a mixture of relief and sorrow washing over him. "I know you didn't mean for things to turn out this way, but here we are. I can't keep living like this, feeling like I'm just a project to you. Or worse, that our intimacy is just another reward for losing another pound." "So, what are you saying?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I need to take a break from the diet. from the rewards, from everything. I need to figure out if I can find my way back to loving myself without conditions. And we need to figure out if we can love each other again, without all these transactions. Emily nodded slowly, the reality of his words sinking in. Okay, she murmured. Let's take that break then. Let's try to find us again. The weeks that followed were a mix of awkward adjustments and tentative interactions. James stopped his rigorous dieting and began to eat normally, though he kept his activity level high to maintain his health. Without the pressure of the next weigh-in, he felt a burden lift, though the uncertainty of their relationship weighed heavily on both their hearts. Emily, on her part, tried to make amends in small ways. She initiated activities they used to enjoy together, like evening walks and movie nights, trying to bridge the gap that had formed between them. Slowly, very slowly, they started talking more openly about their feelings, about their fears and hopes for the future. However, the shadow of Emily's ultimatum lingered. James couldn't help but wonder if Emily's change of heart was genuine, or if it was just another strategy to keep him on track. This doubt seeded a cold undercurrent to their recovering warmth, a reminder of the trust that had been damaged, perhaps irreparably. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset from their backyard, James turned to Emily with a serious look in his eyes. "Do you think we can really get past all this?" he asked. Emily took his hand, squeezing it gently. "I hope so. I really do. I love you, James, and I miss us. I miss the way things were before all this started." James nodded, looking out at the fading light. "I miss that too. Let's keep trying, okay?" "Okay," Emily agreed, her voice soft but determined. As they sat together in the growing dusk, both understood the road ahead would be difficult. They had taken the first steps towards healing, but the journey to rebuild their trust and rekindle their love was just beginning. As the days of attempted normalcy passed, James found himself caught in a paradox of improvement and doubt. He enjoyed the regained freedom from the strict regimen, but couldn't shake off the suspicions that Emily's change of heart was perhaps superficial. Was her support genuine, or just a desperate attempt to salvage their relationship without addressing the deeper issues? His trust, once unshakable, now required more than words to restore. It needed proof, clarity about past actions, particularly about the threat Emily had once made. That nagging doubt led James to a decision that would either heal or shatter what was left of their fragile union. "I need to know for sure," James muttered to himself one morning after Emily left for work. He couldn't ignore the elephant in the room any longer. If Emily had been faithful, perhaps they could truly move forward. But if not, it was better to face that harsh truth now rather than rebuild on a foundation of lies. James began his investigation by checking the simplest and most accessible records, their shared mobile and home phone logs. Knowing that both accounts were in his name facilitated the process without raising Emily's suspicions. He first logged into the online account dashboards, scanning for unfamiliar numbers or unusual patterns. In September 2 years prior, the month when Emily's ultimatum was first issued, James noticed several calls to an unknown number that did not match any of their family or friends. The calls were frequent and always made during times he was either at work or out for his long evening walks. Armed with this information, James felt a mix of vindication and dread. It seemed there was something to uncover, after all. His next step was to obtain detailed records. He contacted their service providers, requesting printouts of call logs and text messages for the last 3 years. The operators confirmed that the records could be provided for a nominal fee and would be ready for pickup in a few days. While waiting for the records, James wrestled with his conscience. "Am I doing the right thing?" he often questioned, feeling like an intruder in his own life. Yet, the need for truth propelled him forward, past his discomfort. When he finally received the records, James spent hours poring over them. The same unknown number appeared consistently, especially on days he wasn't home. Heart pounding, he prepared himself for the next step, confronting the owner of that number. Using an online service, James performed a reverse phone lookup and discovered that the number belonged to a local gym trainer named Tony, someone Emily had occasionally mentioned in passing but never in a context that seemed inappropriate. However, the frequency of her calls to him, often right after James left the house, painted a troubling picture. The next day, James drove to the gym under the guise of considering a membership. He observed from a distance as Tony interacted with clients, searching for any sign of familiarity when Tony mentioned Emily's name. "Sure, I know Emily. She's been a client here for a while," Tony said casually when James inquired, feigning ignorance of their relationship. "Great dedication." James nodded, masking his turmoil. "I might join her sessions then," he said, plotting his next move. Back at home, James felt the weight of his findings crushing him. He needed to confront Emily, but feared the destruction of the remnants of their marriage. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, James's mind raced with possibilities. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of pain. "Emily, we need to talk about Tony." Emily's fork clattered to her plate, her face paling. "Tony? The trainer? What about him?" James took a deep breath, his decision firm. "I know about the calls, Em. I've seen the records. Can you please tell me what's going on?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, her voice a whisper. "James, I can explain." This conversation would either pave the way for a painful but necessary healing process or lead to an irrevocable split. As Emily began to speak, James braced himself for the truth, whatever it might be. As Emily gathered her thoughts, the silence between them felt like a chasm. James watched her closely, the evidence of the phone records like a heavy anchor in his heart. He needed to hear her side, but the dread of what she might reveal was almost paralyzing. "James, Emily started, her voice faltering. "When I made that threat about looking elsewhere, I was angry and scared. It wasn't right, and I never actually intended to follow through with it. Tony was just someone to talk to, someone who listened when I was frustrated." James's brow furrowed, trying to process her words. "Talk about what, Emily? Why didn't you talk to me instead?" Emily sighed, wiping a tear that slipped down her cheek. "I wanted to, but I felt like you were so consumed by the diet and the changes in your life. I didn't want to burden you further." It was never romantic, James. It was just conversation. "But why so often? Why during times I wasn't home?" James pressed, his voice a mix of curiosity and hurt. "It was just timing, really. After you left, it was my lowest point of the day, feeling alone. I didn't plan it to hurt you," Emily explained, her eyes pleading for him to understand. James was silent, digesting her words. He wanted to believe her, to throw away the records and forget he ever doubted her. But trust, once cracked, wasn't easily mended. "James, I never cheated on you. I swear it." Emily reached across the table, her hand outstretched towards him. "Can we try to move past this? Can we try to rebuild what we've lost?" James looked at her hand, then at her face, a face he had loved and trusted for years. He was at a crossroads, torn between his love for Emily and his shattered trust. "I need some time, Em," James finally said, pulling his hand back gently. "I need to think about all of this." Emily nodded, her heart sinking but understanding his need for space. "Okay, I'll give you all the time you need." The next few days were some of the longest in their marriage. James spent hours alone, walking, thinking, and sometimes just sitting in silence. He replayed their conversations, Emily's explanations, and his own fears. He realized that if he was ever going to move forward, with or without Emily, he needed to resolve this doubt once and for all. He decided to meet with Tony directly, seeking the truth from another perspective. Arranging a casual meeting at the gym, James confronted Tony. "Tony, I know about the calls with Emily. I just want to hear from you. What were these conversations about?" James asked, his tone firm yet open to understanding. Tony looked surprised but responded honestly. "Look, man, Emily talked about fitness, sure, but she also vented about life, about pressure, about you. But it was never beyond that. She's committed to you, man. Just stressed, you know?" James listened, a mix of relief and residual skepticism in his heart. He thanked Tony for his honesty and left, feeling a lightness he hadn't felt in weeks. Returning home, James found Emily in the garden, tending to her flowers, a metaphor not lost on him. He watched her for a moment, the afternoon sun casting shadows that played across her face, showing her concentration and care. "Emily," James called out as he approached her. Emily stood and wiped her hands on her apron, turning to face him with a cautious smile. I met with Tony, James started. Watching her reaction closely, Emily's face fell slightly, but she nodded for him to continue. He confirmed what you said. It was just talking. I believe both of you, James admitted, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Emily's eyes filled with tears again, this time tears of relief. Oh, James, she said, stepping forward to embrace him. Thank you for believing in me, for giving us another chance. James held her tightly, feeling the pieces of their broken trust beginning to mend. Let's start over, Em. Really start over this time. As they stood in their garden, the scent of blooming flowers around them, James felt a renewed sense of hope. They had a long journey ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt they were on the path together. In the weeks that followed their reconciliation in the garden, James and Emily worked diligently on rebuilding their relationship. They attended couples therapy, where they learned new ways to communicate and express their vulnerabilities without fear or resentment. Slowly, the cold distance that had settled between them began to thaw, replaced by a tentative warmth. During one session, Emily opened up about her fears of losing James, not just to health issues, but to his changing lifestyle, which he had felt increasingly alienated from. James listened, truly listened, and realized that much of Emily's earlier behavior had been driven by fear and a misguided attempt to keep him close. I thought if I pushed you to be healthier, we'd get more time together. I didn't consider how it made you feel about yourself and us, Emily admitted, her voice trembling with the weight of her realization. James took her hand, squeezing it gently. And I should have seen your fear. I got so wrapped up in the numbers on the scale and forgot about the reasons I was doing it all, to have a longer, happier life with you. Their therapist nodded, pleased with their progress. It's about finding balance, not just in diet or health, but in how you support each other. It's okay to have fears, but how you handle them together, that's what strengthens a marriage. Inspired by their therapy sessions, James and Emily started implementing new routines. They cooked meals together, ensuring they were healthy but more importantly, that they were an activity they did as a team. They set aside time each evening to talk about their day, their thoughts, and their feelings, reconnecting in ways that had been lost in the shuffle of daily life. As autumn approached, they decided to renew their vows. It was a quiet ceremony, just the two of them and a few close friends in their backyard, the same place where they had taken the first steps toward mending their bond. The air was crisp, leaves a burst of colors around them, mirroring the renewal of their love. Today, I don't just renew my vows of love and partnership, James declared, looking into Emily's eyes. I promise to strive for balance and to cherish our journey together, whatever it may bring. Emily smiled through tears, her voice steady and sure. And I vow to trust in our love, to support you without conditions, and to face our fears together, not apart. The simplicity of the ceremony was a stark contrast to their lavish wedding years earlier, but it felt more profound. This was a true celebration of their growth and commitment. Moving forward, they maintained their healthy habits, but with a new perspective. James kept up his exercise, not as a chore or a necessity to meet a condition, but as a joy and a celebration of what his body could do. Emily found joy in planning activities that could bring them closer, often joining James on his morning walks. Their home became a sanctuary again, a place of laughter and love, of shared dreams and mutual respect. They learned to embrace imperfections, in themselves and each other, celebrating progress no matter how small. Months turned into years, and while not every day was perfect, each challenge was met with a stronger, united front. Their love, once brittle and conditional, had deepened into something resilient and unconditional. As they sat together one evening, watching the sunset from their porch, James turned to Emily and said, "You know, I think we're going to be okay." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sky turn from blue to hues of orange and pink. "Yes, we are. Because we face it together."